You're set.
Yes.
All set.
Yeah, as I said, we are streaming live on YouTube, and we are also have available a Zoom webinar link, which you can be found on our agenda, which the agenda can be found on Town of Camden website under the select board, agendas for May 16th. Please click on that. Could we close the door?
Yeah, Jeremy's doing that exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
If anybody who's remote, if you'd like to participate on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function. It's the only one we recognize, frankly, and we'll try to get to everybody as much as possible. Do not chat. We don't monitor the chat function. So with that, I will call to order the agenda. Our first item is any public comment on non-agenda items. Anyone here? Peter?
Evening, name is Peter Lindquist.
Right. We're gonna press the button.
Okay,
Thank you.
good evening. Peter Lindquist, Chestnut Street. I just come to remind our town manager and our select board and our citizens of a few things that we seem to be possibly missing or overlooking. I'm getting the feeling from speaking to the public, but also some select board members and the manager, that we're under some kind of deadline as this select board is wrapping up and we get a new one in place. And that's kind of interesting. I'm worried about the amount of executive sessions that are taking place and probably will take place. And I worry that executive sessions, although they may be legal, they do allow less public understanding because it's wrapped up. A diplomatic and sustainable procedure, open and transparent, I believe would be helpful. On a different note, I finished the budget committee meetings and noticed the 2 weeks after the budget committee meeting, we saw a lot of foot patrols by our police department and public safety officials, both in walking the town and in vehicles. And that was very impressive. That was great. And I think the public appreciated it. I think it was very effective. It is now stopped. We have, you could walk from the yacht club over to Walgreens right now and see, without really doing much work at it, you could see a tremendous amount of distracted driving, and you still have snow tires on people's cars driving around town. These are probably citizens. But if we had public safety officials kind of walking, you might have an opportunity to, my goodness, hand out a ticket. I'm not interested in the details of how many tickets that the public safety office puts out in the last month. On a different note about ordinances, we have them. One ordinance that has come up as far as enforcement is something that I mentioned not once, but twice, 3 times, probably in the last 2 years, are clear cutting ordinances. In the watershed project, I call it 1.0. The early one 3 years ago, and now the recent one that is costing $350,000 in scientific efforts. They both of these watershed projects mentioned that clear cutting is an ordinance that is advisable. It's logical, and other towns have them, and they help all sorts of things keep from washing into our waterways. It's called a clear cutting ordinance. Maine. Yeah, point of order, Bob. I'll get there. Just, yeah, thanks. While we're on ordinances, we have a couple of other ordinances that we seem to embody around town, but we don't enforce them. One is fireworks. It's illegal to have fireworks in town, but the town okays it and approves it for certain groups every year. We don't need to do that. Another one is alcohol out at the snowball. Your town manager has told you there's no alcohol on the ball field, but once a year we ignore it. It's just when you have an ordinance and you ignore it by town policy, it kind of makes people not trust you. And I think we need to engender more trust. Dumping the plastic ducks in the water to raise money for Rotary, I don't think is necessary anymore. We got a year from now. Yeah, be right there, Bob. So Bob, just to make a point to you, you've given at different meetings, 12 and 14 minutes to other people. So,
Peter, please continue.
thanks. I'll be right there with you.
Summarize.
Yep, we'll summarize. Something that also should be at least looked at is program support for the daycare programs out at the Y and the Snowball. And then last but not least, to help Bob get this meeting on track, there are 3 pieces of property that the town owns that it is very low on the priority list as far as I can see. How are we handling the yacht club as far as the destruction and caretaking? We're a landlord of the yacht club. Are we a good landlord? Does anybody know? Do we have reports? I'd like to see more about that because it's just the same thing. We're a landlord out at the Snowball. We charge money for a piece of property that is less than, I don't even know if it's approved for use. And last but not least, there's a piece of property in the town landing that the chamber uses, and it would be a great use for us to turn it into something, they're called toilets and showers for boat owners and users. And I'm glad to see Mr. Bostridge here, because I'd like to hear more about the sewage treatment plant project.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody else have a comment on a non-agenda item? Not seeing any hands, we'll move on to our second item on our agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from April 18th meeting, which was 4 weeks ago. Any comments, board, or motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the April 18 meeting.
I'll second.
Motion made to second. Any comments? All those in favor? I want to make sure Tom wasn't trying to get on.
Oh, right, yeah.
Thank you. On to item 3, which is public
So
hearing.
it passes 4-0 just for the minutes taker.
Yes, correct. It's 4-0, correct. We have 2 public hearings this evening on the docket. The purpose of public hearing is for the select board to solicit input from the public on the matters at hand. I will ask anybody from the public who wants to speak for, against, or just speak to the matter at hand to come forward, provide their name and address, and make their comments. Please be brief. And any questions are directed for myself. Please be courteous, of course. At the conclusion, after every person from the public has spoken, I will close the public hearing portion and revert to decision by the select board. So with that, the first public hearing we have is for Goods General Store, LLC, doing business as Goods at 31 Elm Street, Unit 2, for a new Class A restaurant lounge license. Anybody like to speak to that matter here? No?
Come on up.
Sure.
Yeah, you're here.
It's your opportunity.
It's your opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Goods is a specialty market around the corner.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Meg Sang. I'm one of the owners. We also have Emily, who's one of our employees with us. It's a specialty market around the corner. And we're looking to add a little bar and snack counter to the inside of it. So it'll function as kind of a little food, drink area, 4 to 7, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, in addition to our regular market hours. So just a little kind of combination of all the things we're already doing.
Great, awesome. When is the bar open?
It'll be open, like the date itself.
Yeah.
We're looking to do June 8th. It's kind of our little soft launch.
Perfect.
Great.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank
Welcome
you.
and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Any other comments from the public on this matter? I will close the public hearing on this liquor license and revert to a decision by the select board. Please.
Make a motion that we approve the liquor license for Goods.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? All's in favor? It's 4-0 unanimous. Welcome. Good luck with the license. The second item we have tonight is La Cave at 7 Public Landing for an extension of their current Class 1 restaurant liquor license to include the outside patio. Anybody from the public like to speak to this item? Not seeing any hands, I'll close the public portion of the discussion revert to select board deliberation.
So I just have one question.
Sure.
So some towns, and I don't know, and I didn't have a chance to research, but is there a time, a schedule by which alcohol on public spaces must stop? Like, so in some towns, you know, you cannot drink alcohol after 10 p.m. on public space or things like that. Do we have anything of the sort in Canada?
I'm not aware of any such restriction in Camden, no.
In the state of Maine, it's 1:15.
1:15, okay, so,
Last call is at 1.
okay, good to know.
Any other comments?
I just heard such good things about this place that it's been open and open late and vibrant, and several people have said, wow, what's this new place? And so I hope
Good
they
to
keep
hear.
staying
That's
open
good to
late.
hear. Any other comments, board, or a motion to approve?
I make a motion that we approve the liquor license for La Cave.
Second.
Motion made with second. Deliberation. Any comments, board? All those in favor? 4-0. Thank you very much. This is the end of the public hearing, and we revert next to our consent agenda, which we've had 2 items. The first item is the renewal of the Vittler and Lodging Establishment licenses for Barron's Restaurant, Camden Harbor Inn, Harbor Dogs, High Tide Inn, River Ducks, Salt Wharf, and Swan House. The second item on consent agenda is a taxi cab operator's driver's license for Zachary Z. Moshire. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Are there any objections to the items on the consent agenda of the board?
I don't have any objections, but Chris is here.
I will let him come up in a minute.
Thank you.
Any objections? We're not hearing any of these matters. These items are hereby approved. But if Zachary's here, I'd love to hear from him.
Maybe Chris.
Chris, I'm
Chris is
sorry.
here.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Members of the select board, Mr. Kevin, Chris Wolf, 47 Start Road. Representing Wolfie's Wheels, I am sorry, but Zachary was not able to attend the select board meeting tonight. I hope that's not a precursor to him getting approved.
We'll wait for that.
Yeah, well, it was a last minute thing, and we've known him for a long time. We're looking at him to pick up nighttime hours and drive the cab, and I'm getting quite busy, by the way.
Good.
You're gonna be a busy little bee.
Yeah, it's turning out very, very well.
I know.
So with your approval, we'll have one more driver, and then I believe on the next select board agenda, we'll have another driver.
Oh, wow.
And we're trying desperately to pick up a second.
Second, okay.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, we do airport runs.
Keep it rolling, Chris.
I hit Michelle. Chris,
Handed to Sophie.
Chris takes me to the airport, and last time I made my plane by literally 6 minutes. So,
Not because of my drive.
not because of.
Can
It was
I
Can I just ask a question
Yes.
about how we approve these? How did that come about that the driver has to come here, that their license is public information, and that we have to approve every driver that comes through?
Right.
It's the.
It's
The
the
Camden
law.
way.
It's the ordinance,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't have a problem with it, and I
I do.
love that the select board meets the driver.
No, we love seeing you too.
We have quite a few layers of
Yeah,
things added on in Camden ordinances that sometimes don't.
good question. Thank you.
It's
Chris.
good, but Chris also always makes an effort to come
Right, it's nice.
and to introduce us to new drivers, and it's a good
Appreciate
reminder
it.
that,
It's appreciated.
especially as partying season is starting, that there are taxis available in Camden.
Mhm, mhm.
Oh, I'm sure it's just fantastic advertising for all the people that are watching.
With that, we'll move on to our 5th item on our agenda, which is 5 action items. The first of which is consideration of a new Vittler license for goods at 31 Elm Street. And I think we have to drag you up again. But you're welcome
I'm
to
happy to.
board.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I make a motion.
How can we do the other part?
We just
Because
pulled
it's
it off
too-
because they're a new business,
New
so we
business,
thought
yeah.
maybe they would wanna come up to
Dance twice.
speed, but then the liquor license was before, so.
So I make a motion that I make a motion that we approve the victualler's license for goods.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All's in favor?
I just
Oh,
wanted
yeah,
to
of
just
course.
have one little,
Of
so,
course.
the part in the packet that's highlighted that the life and safety code inspection hasn't been done yet, is that a common thing that,
No,
No, it's been,
so the, or is it just highlighted because,
sometimes is a yes, no check mark on the form is so confusing, is it?
yeah, that's just my,
No, that's a good
not
question.
sure.
Is that something that the state also checks? Like, where does our role,
As a vendor license?
yeah? Isn't, I mean, the state ultimately issues that, right? Just,
Yeah, sorry, is that for the health inspector that comes through?
no,
The Camden Fire Department, when they do the life,
Oh, I think that was because in discussions with Janice, she was just marking that we needed to do that, but they did come through.
so
Make it contingent.
I'll make I'm amending my motion to make it contingent on receiving the the safety inspection from the fire department. That we approve it as a victualler's license.
I will reset.
Second, any rediscussion?
Thanks
All
for,
those in favor?
thanks for pointing it
Or
out,
is it-
Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I usually zoom.
The second item on our action list tonight is the subject is the Pearl Street Sewer Replacement Project from Free Street to Park Street. Discussion of contract modification and funding authorization for same. We got all kinds of people coming up. Who wants to lead over? Would you say?
So I'll start it off, and I've asked both Dave St. Laurent as the department head that's managing the Pearl Street construction project, and Dave Bolstrich, who of course is the wastewater superintendent, to be here to answer any questions. In your memo, it sort of runs through this. You probably remember at the February meeting when you approved the original contract, we talked about, you know, why doesn't this include the second half of Pearl Street? And at that point, we told you we weren't certain about the condition of the line, and we were going to camera it to see, you know, what it looked like. And depending on that, we would come back to you to ask, you know, to extend the scope of the contract if we found that the line wasn't in good enough condition to also replace the laterals. And that's indeed what we found, and we can show you some pictures of what we found because it's interesting.
Can we have that?
Yes, so what I'm gonna do, I will, oh. No, that's not protected. I'm gonna share my screen so everybody.
There it is.
So you want me to speak louder?
Yes, please.
So I'm just helping Dave out here. So this is the section that we're talking, this is this discussion point. So we had cambered this section before, and it seemed like it was adequate at the time to line. But before we were gonna go and put, you know, $300,000 on top of this road, we wanted to make sure the line was in good enough shape to line before proceeding. So we did another inspection of the line. And if you can go to the next slide. So what we hired a company that actually could do the laterals. We currently can't do the laterals from the camera. We have to go from the inside of the building and go from the inside out. But what this shows is when this is a car, basically it drives through the sewer line. So this sewer line that we're talking about, this section of sewer line is like old clay tile pipe. And the way these clay tile pipes are put together is that segments, and they'll route them in together and just kind of put the pieces together. And what happens is they become rigid at that point, and the frost cycles, they'll crack, and the joints will crack and leak. Which, you know, that isn't really the total reason why we're doing this, but it's a big reason for I&I. So then what happens is you also have these obstructions with the old that's a lateral right there coming into the main line.
Yeah.
And in order to line this, they have to go through and grind out every one of these laterals that's protruding into the main line. And the main line also has to be in pretty good shape to do it. So this is the lateral launcher off the car, which not all car, we don't have one that has this, but this one does. So he can now push that lateral launcher into the lateral and then look up inside the lateral. So what we found was, when we got onto people's private property, there's two types of material for these pipes. There's the clay tile pipe, and there's also something called Orangeburg, which is the service line or the lateral going to the home. Clay tile pipe is a clay pipe and has about a life expectancy of 50 to 60 years. The Orangeburg pipe is a cellulose type of pipe that they made in the 70s, actually the 30s, all the way up until the 70s. And it's impregnated with glues and tars, and it's just basically a cardboard pipe. And it was a great thing back then, but it just didn't really last that long. It lasted anywhere between 30 to 40 years. So we're beyond those life expectancies for both of those material types. And what we're finding is that along with you can go to the next slide, along with the clay tile pipe cracking, which you can see in this photo, and you can go to the next one, Andrea. Then you also see the piece missing on the top there. Okay, so then go to the next one. And now you have root intrusion. So clay tile pipe, the other thing that's very common with it is because of these grouted joints and the freeze thaw cycle, they'll break apart and allow the roots to kind of find their way in and get nutrients and water. So they really attract roots. So that's the drawback. So you know, all contributing to the I&I problems, we have the cracking, the root intrusion, the joint leaking, and some of the breaking of the line itself. Along with the fact that the laterals are made of this Orangeburg, which is just mush. So some of them will look okay, and others will look really bad. This is kind of a one that doesn't look that great, as you can see. We found some that the homeowner doesn't even live here in the wintertime, just goes away for the winter, comes back in the summer. The thing's completely plugged, but because it's broken up so much, everything's just leaking into the ground. So it isn't even going into the sewer line, and it hasn't gone into the sewer line for some time. So see, you can see how this is kind of a rolled paper type of material. So this is the Orangeburg. So all those things are contributing to the I&I for that section of the road. And our main objective is to remove the I&I. So you don't want to go and we'll put $300,000 on top of this road when we have this infrastructure underneath. The only way to truly eliminate this problem is we need to do it correctly from the lateral, which is from the home to the main line, and in chunks. So every time we do a road, we should be putting the money aside to do the infrastructure underneath and take it right to the home. Then we can go in our GIS system, mark this off as done, and move on to the next piece. Otherwise, you'll never solve this problem. You'll just chase your tail. Because if we do a piece here, a piece there, we'll never know where we left off. This is the only real way to do it. The unfortunate part of all this is it's expensive.
Audra, for some reason, it's showing on it's showing a different thing on that than it's showing on the Zoom shared screen. So for people on YouTube, it looks like maybe you need to mirror your display rather than, I'm not sure those people on YouTube would have been able to see.
Videos.
Just, maybe we can put the presentation online after.
Yeah.
So the second part of all this is when we found this out, we approached the contractor, and there's two ways of fixing this problem. So the main line, you can line it and you can replace the laterals. In order to do that, you would need to dig up each spot where the lateral is, cut into the main line, which is this clay tile pipe, which is really hard to work with. It's just like a piece of pottery. And you basically are cutting it, and then you have to put in a PVC section and then a T-Y, and then take it to the home. And you have to do that, almost 40 times on this section of road. And after you're done, you're only gonna have little chunks of 10 feet of clay tile pipe in between these sections that you're replaced. So you just hodgepodge this whole thing together. Then you need to go and align it, which, it gives off a lot of chemicals. People, there's different ways of doing it, but one type does give off a foul odor. It isn't like replacing the pipe, it's a compromise.
Is mine?
The lining, yes, and you're not, you're still gonna have the problems with potentially with where, it settles or breaks or it doesn't get lined properly, or where you have a lateral coming in, it didn't seal around it really well. But that isn't even an option, because we brought that to the contractor and he says, no way, we don't want to do it. We're out. If you're gonna line it, cut all these pieces, we don't even want to do it. And so they said, we'll hold our prices if we replace the whole line. But if you want to go and put these laterals to at least the right of way mark, we're not gonna participate. They didn't want to do it. It's just a hard job, and it doesn't come out very well, I guess. So our situation is, we have a contractor that gave us good rate. We have good numbers. They're doing a good job, and we can finish the whole job. So at that point, we let Audra know, Dave and I were talking about it, and they looked at funding. So from there, I think Audra can explain the rest of the funding piece of it. But we also incorporated in Free Street, because that was another part of the original job, was to do both Free Street and Olive Pearl. Because Free Street's, Dave knows better than I do, but
Yeah,
that's in bad
the
shape.
rest of all of Pearl Free Street.
Mhm.
And I will say the contractor that we have now is, their rates are excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's an opportunity to get rid of a lot of plate pipe.
Can I ask questions? Couple questions. What's the material we're using now if we're not using clay pipe? Is it PVC? Is it PVC? And what's the life expectancy?
Forever. I don't know.
Well,
Nothing's forever, but it's
but it's
it's
like,
the best thing on the market now. There's no
Right.
better product.
Yeah, I really haven't heard a number, but somewhere between 1,500 years.
yeah, that's what but, and we're gonna replace the laterals up to the right of way, and
No, so what we do is
we go all the way to the private property.
we check each lateral
Okay,
and we camera the lateral. If we find the lateral is bad or bad material, we replace it to the right of way, and then we also let the homeowner know we replace it all the way to the home.
They replace it.
Excuse me.
The homeowner
The
replaces
homeowner pays for the section between the right of way and the home.
it. Okay.
But we are working with them. We haven't had anybody not want to do that.
right.
yeah, well, it's,
It's smart.
Yeah, they're
and I-
taking advantage of it.
I think another point, and I think the board probably knows this, but for everybody in the audience or at home. So we recently signed a consent agreement with DEP for sanitary sewer overflows. A lot of it was caused by I&I into our freshwater into our system during storm events. And a lot of it was focused on the C Street and the Baby Street pump station. And Pearl Street is one of all the, wastewater that's collected goes to the Baby Street pump station. So this will take a significant amount of fresh water out of our system and be, pretty substantial and.
One other thing we find when we were cameraing this is we found, there's actually an old stormwater line that runs along the edge of the east side of the road. And we found that we have lines that are coming from homes tied into this, but then it's tied into the sewer line.
Right.
And it's a big source of water, so it was actually a good line.
Was the entire lateral we're contemplating lining, replacing, was it video the entire length?
What they do is when they get to they start at the main line and they'll camera the lateral and go all the way to the home.
Right.
What they're finding is it's usually cast steel coming out of the home, and then it goes to this Orangeburg, and then it goes into the main.
how do we dispose of Orangeburg and well, clay? I'm not so worried about disposing of clay, but
Well, I mean, sometimes they bury it in place, and other times they take it from the landfill.
Is there any part of Pearl Street that has already had construction done that this is gonna be needed?
I don't.
Have you, we don't want to finish the construction over there and then have to go back and do this.
We don't want to pave the road and then have to find out we gotta dig the road up to fix the
So is
pipe,
there
you know.
a portion of any other portion on that road that has been paved that we didn't camera and needs to be?
We're cameraing all of it,
Okay,
and we want to fix all of it, all the pipe in the ground, water, sewer, stormwater, before we pave. Because I don't want to go, once you cut open a road, you just reduce the life expectancy of it, in paving, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
So you really, there'll be a 5-year moratorium on this road once we're done. And, if you cut into it, you're gonna have to go 20 feet on each side of the curb.
Right.
Of the cut, which is expensive, but it's the only way to prevent, premature failure of the road.
So the impact to project budget is,
So there's two parts to it, but there's the second part from Park Street to Free Street. And then the second part is all of Free Street. And Audra has, I think, in the memo listed the total amount extra for that.
So it's 788,700,
That's the additional cost, right? That's what it says in the memo.
yes.
But there's a wastewater special revenue fund of 1.3 million that we're proposing to draw
that's resumed.
Yeah.
from, right?
So just so you know, that replaces the main line. And it replaces the lateral, it pays for the camera on the laterals. It's paying for the actual replacement of the lateral too, because we're going back after and charging the homeowner after we do that.
So there's gonna be a small revenue line.
So a little bit.
How much are we-
asking to
do we-
reimburse.
Oh, that's fine.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Allison, go ahead.
So some of that is gonna get reimbursed?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And we're drawing this from wastewater reserve.
Yes, so it's, you can think of it as the wastewater unassigned fund balance.
I see.
How much is in the wastewater unassigned fund balance in total?
1.3 million.
So we're gonna use all of it? Oh, no, sorry.
No, we're only using,
Sorry.
we're drawing.
Sorry, yes, yeah.
A little more
I
than
didn't say.
half.
But, do we know the cost per, is it like linear foot to private owners?
We
Or
figure,
you're gonna figure it
Bob
out?
can do this in his head, because I'm standing here, I won't be able to have this, but it's about 2,000 feet, and it's
Oh, it's $100 a foot for laterals and $175 for the sewer main. And then the thing that Dave Bolstrich really, his ears perked up at was, I think, 5,500 per manhole,
Yes, yeah,
which I guess is a really good
That's
price.
a good price.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely, really nice. We put some in 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was 10,000 from that one.
That's really
Yeah,
expensive.
that's,
Let's do more.
No comment.
well, I think it's the magnitude,
Yeah,
there's the cost now.
do we have that 1.3 that's in the reserve, was that in there for any other project that we were gonna put on hold, or that we're going to have to push forward, anything like that?
Another project,
I mean, I think John Street is sort of the next one that we need to be prepared for.
yeah.
But I think that given, our challenges with I&I and that, we're only gonna get an opportunity like this on a street like Pearl Street once every 20, 30 years. It really kind of takes priority over anything else we want to do.
Allison has a question.
Go ahead, Allison.
Didn't we fund part of this with ARPA funds?
I was gonna ask that.
Are we gonna, now that,
A little bit.
are we gonna pay back the ARPA funds with?
We certainly could. We don't really need to. I think that with John Street, we might need to consider using the ARPA funds for other purposes because they're all going to have to be spent by FY 26.
Right.
And John Street is probably gonna take a little bit longer to coordinate and build, given that, we're doing it with MDOT.
Because I was gonna ask this question because we had scheduled to use ARPA funds for John Street, but Pearl Street was ready before John Street, so we went
Yes.
ahead with that. And we had said at the time that we would reimburse the ARPA funds, so we would have enough funding. That's what you're alluding to. We would have enough funding to go ahead with John Street, so we're
Right.
good for both.
We are good for both.
And we don't need to reimburse the ARPA funds in our.
We don't. We just need to make sure that those are spent by 2026. So
But
we're
the-
gonna have to keep an eye on it over the next 2 years.
But the wastewater treatment plant is supposed to be funded by user fees, and ARPA funds I mean, I'm not saying it's
Are
approved
being used
use,
for sewer
but it would be a sort
collection
of a
systems.
policy or philosophical decision to say that rather than, we're gonna pay for some of these sewer projects by using ARPA funds rather than raising rates the full amount. So it feels like, since ARPA funds can be used for so many different things, it seems like we should have maybe a little bit more robust conversation about whether to
Use it.
repay the ARPA funds
But the
from the
issue,
sewer fund.
How much ARPA do we use?
We haven't, I mean, this project would have been about 165,000 if we use ARPA funds for it.
Right.
And we have like close to 500,000, I think it's like 490,000.
That's what I thought. So it's not a big matter.
no, but I'm not opposed to what Allison's saying, but I think the issue is the timing. It's like, what can we do between now and 2026 with the ARPA funds? That's the issue. We need to spend them.
Yeah, it's not-
So-
Sure, I'm just saying, okay, when we have, I mean, I pay wastewater
Me
rates
too.
as do you, so I'm kind of arguing against my own self-interest here, but it's just a good thing to talk about maybe a little bit. And then I have one more question.
Sure.
How is this gonna change the Pearl Street construction schedule?
So that was what I was going to just say there. So this really throws a wrench in everything, because I had this all scheduled to be done a certain way. So now I'm gonna have to do the section from Park Street to John Street first. Because that's gonna be complete real shortly here, maybe in another couple weeks. Then I'll grind that, pave that, but start the sidewalk on that side. It's gonna extend the project from Park Street to Free Street almost into October. And both sections of the road will only get a binder coat of pavement. And that's good in a way, because then you can let it over winter and it kind of settles out, and then you come over with the final course of pavement and it evens everything out, it makes all the bumps and lumps out of it. I mean, we were looking at a late August, September timeframe, you know, we're pushing it out a little further. I don't think it's gonna change much for anybody. I mean, it's gonna be good for one section of the road. They're gonna get done early, but the other section is gonna kind of drag on.
Yeah.
And I'll have a meeting with the Pearl Street residents as an update to kind of, but one of the things is that second section, there was concern that we weren't doing their sewer line. So I don't think that they're gonna think this is a bad thing. I think.
That's what I was trying to point out by
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah, I think people wanted it done. They didn't want a aligned system. They wanted to replace like the other end.
So you're gonna try to have this done by Halloween?
That's my goal. I mean, it may be a variation of completion. It may be like completion of the road and maybe not the sidewalks fully completed, and then I'll finish that in springtime. But I'll have it so most people won't know.
Yeah.
I have one last question, if I may. Is there a way now, once we have new pipes and potentially less INI, can we measure the differential? How much water we're removing from?
That's very difficult.
Very
Yeah.
Can we put one
We
of
could
those
calculate
things?
it, but I'm not sure, maybe plus or minus 50%.
Yeah, it's not.
But weren't they gonna put, those, right, Pierce said that they have these flow meters that they put in certain sections of the main,
Yeah,
that they do that.
you can, but it's the difficulty gets into, what if somebody's, home using something more than they did before?
Oh, yeah, but somebody's dishwasher or whatever isn't gonna throw this off as much
It
as,
doesn't have to be.
if it's actually really substantive difference,
I think
hopefully.
it's significant rainfall events. Those
Yeah.
are what you measure.
Right.
So-
But we can measure it against rainfall like they've done in the past. I mean, if a lot of this doesn't even make it to the Baby Street pump station, it overflows right by the fire station when that manhole pops off, so maybe that'll pop off less.
Any other questions, board?
No,
Motion.
yeah, I'm ready to make a motion that we approve the proposed additional cost of $788,700 and that we draw it from the 1.3 million unassigned fund balance for the wastewater.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor? 4-0. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave.
Dave and Dave. We have I and Dave and Dave.
And I and Dave and Dave. The next time on our action.
Oh, wait, 1 second.
What?
I think it would be super cool to put the video on the town website because it's so, I'm sure I'm not the only person who was super interested by the video and learning what's in our sewer pipe. So let's make sure that the public can see that.
Tony,
Tony,
you know the drill, Tony.
Tony Grassi, 363 Belfast Road, Camden. Has anybody considered this issue of PVC versus HDPE? PVC is a terrible product environmentally. High density polyethylene is pretty benign. My understanding is they have the same life and they have the same pricing structure. So I was surprised to hear him say, so it's just a question.
Good
You know,
question.
why don't we look into that to be sure that in fact we want to be using PVC?
Right, that's a good question.
It's a good
and I
question.
don't
I think they are using
I don't believe the
HDPE in a
price
lot of.
point is- My opinion, the price point is not the same, but it's a good question.
But that, if that's the answer, we should know that.
Well, we should, and we can get that very easily. But that other material is very, very good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, thank you, Tony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is the Castner peer request for relief from the code enforcement officer determination. Just as an intro, maybe before we talk to Ariel, just to be why we're here on Bill, on who does it, just so that everybody understands the steps.
I think I'm going to defer to Bill because he's
Okay.
been more involved in this than I have, and I think he can summarize it more eloquently than I can. Or Jeremy,
Yeah.
sorry, Jeremy's here. I forgot all about you because you're in the back of the room.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
Jeremy's been the most involved of any of us.
All right, Jeremy, you're on.
Maybe we'll tag from Bell if we need to. And representatives for Peter Castner are here, and I think Peter's here as well. Back in February, this was after the big storm in December. Tim Lewis from Phi, who's here as well, submitted permit applications to repair the pier system that was damaged during that December storm. Clint Beveridge, the CEO, and I reviewed the application, albeit it was not a completed application, but we reviewed it and made the determination that what they were proposing was not actually repair and maintenance. Most decisions that a code officer makes are appealable to the zoning board of appeals. But this decision is not actually appealable to the zoning board of appeals. And so just keep in mind there's the shoreline zoning ordinance that regulates piers, and you got the zoning, which is in the zoning ordinance, and then we have the harbor ordinance. On top of that, we have the pier moratorium that is still in play. The pier moratorium does not apply to repairs and maintenance, that was specifically exempted. Subsequently to, after the code officer, while we were making a decision whether or not it was repair or maintenance, we got a submittal from Peter Castner's attorney, indicating to them, or to us, on why they believe it's actually repairs and maintenance and emergency measures, which are in the harbor ordinance. Clint and I, again, we reviewed it and we went with the perspective that it was repairs, and it was not repair and maintenance, and they're actually building in pier. And again, all decisions generally are appealable that a code officer makes. In this case, there's a provision in the harbor ordinance that talks about this. If the code officer doesn't find something as repair or maintenance, you actually send it back. We send it through the process to the harbor committee and the select board, and you go through that down that road. But again, we have a pier moratorium in place, so they can't go down that road at this time. But then if you follow that same language in the ordinance, it does talk about the select board being able to make a determination on whether something is repair or maintenance. So that's what we're here for today. The attorney for Mr. Castner did submit a lot of information. He sent it to the board. There's a lot of information there as well. Unbeknownst to us, when we were reviewing the permit application, they were actually had plans to do repairs and maintenance on this pier this summer. So that, we didn't know that when this was permanent, when they applied. But obviously with the pier moratorium in place, it was, I think, the only decision that the code officer could make at that time. So that's what we're here now, and I did do a little memo, one-page memo. And all, to be honest, what the applicant is asking is request that the board, select board, find that the work they're proposing is regular repair or regular maintenance and or emergency repairs. If the select board does find that, then permits will be requested by the code office and would be issued. We would make sure they're in compliance, obviously,
Right.
with the shoreline zoning ordinance and the harbor ordinance, all those standards. And I would note that, and I think it's in your packet, the chunk of the pier itself is still there, albeit it's on the ocean floor.
Right.
And the
You can spread all
saying
over
it's
the
still
beach.
there, meaning it's not gone, but it's there. And the granite pile and cribbing is still there, out there. I know that they're proposing to reinforce it and reset that, but that's what their proposal is. So I'm gonna turn it over to probably the applicant in this case. I think that's probably the best route at this point. I'm here to answer questions, and Bill is too. Bill and I went round and round about this along with Clint.
Understood. Understood. I'd like to hear from the applicant. Probably requesting
Jeremy.
the hearing. I'm sorry. The appeal.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Matt Manahan, and apologize for the thick, the massive portion in your packets, but there's a lot of background there, and I want to make sure you had all of it, some of the history too, just so you could see the history of the site. With me today is Peter Kastner and also Tim Lewis from Five Builders. Jeremy has kind of given you the background, so I won't do that, but what I'd like to do is just spend a couple brief minutes explaining what it is we're asking. Peter is then going to go over some additional materials. He brought some photos and some other materials just to show you the situation out there and what remains of the pier. And then I'll just get up and close. We shouldn't take hopefully more than 15 minutes, I hope. But just briefly, so Jeremy made reference to this, but in 2022, Peter had contracted with Proc Marine to do the regular maintenance. The pier was in the range of 40 years old, about the walkway portion of the pier was about 40 years old, and so it was showing its wear and tear. It was rusting, and it was showing its wear and tear. So we contracted with them to do those repairs. They were going to be done this year, 2023. But then, of course, big storm in December came, made a mess of everything out there, tore that walkway off. As Jeremy said, it's on the flats right now. And so that really sort of messed things up. But what we think is that this is the exact situation that the harbor ordinance was intending when it talks about regular maintenance, because we were intending to do these repairs. Just because the storm took off this walkway portion doesn't mean the piers, it's not repair, and that we're planning to do repair. So if I could, I would just turn, if you could turn to my letter that I sent of April 10th. Of April 10th. I just want to quickly go over why it is that under the definition, we think that this is regular maintenance. If you go to page 3 of my letter, of the April 10 letter, actually page 2, the bottom of it quotes the definitions from the ordinance. But if you go to page 3, sort of partway down, I talk about why it is that the work we're doing actually fits within the precise words of the definition of regular maintenance. And so I just want to sort of go over that paragraph with you. It starts with, this work falls squarely within the harbor ordinance definition of regular maintenance because it is restorative work, and restorative work is the term used in the definition, that includes replacing decking, which we're doing here. That is, the walkway extension and the stair from the walkway extension to the deck are being replaced, and refurbishing portions of the decking. Refurbishing is in the ordinance. And what's going to be refurbished is the existing seasonal float and gangway, or pilings. And pilings are going to be refurbished here, the granite crib work and the nearby wooden piling that was there, for the purpose of, and this is the definition, preserving those structures and maintaining the structural integrity of those structures, in order to counteract the effects of usual wear and tear caused by the use of those structures in marine-related activities. So in our view, yeah, we get that in some ways, Jeremy kind of had to do what he had to do because it appeared that this walkway extension was gone. But in point of fact, we had intended to replace this walkway extension in accordance with the way the definition is worded. And there's still a large amount of the pier that's still there. And Peter's going to talk about that. I would just say though, before I turn it over to Peter, we did include a letter from Will Gartley, who in his experience, he's done a ton of these piers in Camden and this whole area. He's been at it for years. You know, I've been doing this and I've been up in Camden and all in this area too. I'm based in Portland, but I've been working with Will for like the 30 years that I've been doing this. And he is in agreement that this is typical of what you would see for regular maintenance. So with that, I would ask Peter to come up and just sort of run through his additional photos. I can hand those out if you want to hand those out here. Sure.
Nice part about it.
Got no photos of it on the ocean floor.
So, I'm Peter Gass, 2 Bay Road. Nice to meet you all. So to begin with, the outer pier, which you see right here, is really an appendage to the main pier, which runs down the side of our house. So this is a portion of it. These were iron beams hidden behind some ASIC siding. With the concealed rust that's been going on since we bought the place. They've become so rusted and fatigued that we actually supported them, hemlock posts, to hold them up. We contracted with Brock Marine to come over and look at it, and we looked at what else was going on in Camden, and people had used laminated glue lam beams, and he didn't really like the look of it. We were looking to make it a little bit more streamlined, make it look a little bit better. So we went with an aluminum structure that Brock has got probably 60 of them in his yard right now. It's a good looking system. He uses EPI. So it's all first class. That was gonna come in and this was gonna come out. He was gonna charge us like $20,000 to expose the old one. Nature's already exposed of it for us. As you say, it's strewn all over. But it's crumpled all up. So, you know, there's no way it could have been repaired in the best of case. So I mean, this is not something, it's kind of like, I guess, an old porch on a house. You know, it goes so far, you can't fix it. It's all rotten. This was all rotten. The iron was completely fatigued. The beams had holes through them, looked like Swiss cheese. So there was no way this could have been repaired in place. So in the best of circumstances, we would have been here now saying, we're gonna pick this up, we're gonna put a new one in place. But instead, nature took it out. It was actually underwater in the storm. So that's what we had. You can drive by, you can look at it next to the yacht club. It's a mess. This is actually part of our pier system here, which still remains. It runs down the length of our house. This granite cribbing is a self-staining granite cribbing put in. Its only usage is to run down to the appendage, which is now gone. But this is also part of the pier and remains. This portion of the pier represents greater than 50% of the existing pier, or it was greater than 50% of the entire pier structure. It still is there, and you can see how much wave action actually stripped the siding off of our house. This is all granite. It's all huge pieces of granite that are infilled. It's not tied into the house. It's a separate structure. And by definition, in your own notes, a pier is something that runs from the water out to the water, you know, from the shoreline out. That's, you know, that's the definition of a pier. And that's what that is. Here are some measurements, which I didn't even go all the way to terra firma. You can see the water line, which is in the survey, but I'm just going to the top of the aluminum ramp, and you've got a distance of 43.8, which is greater than the length of the pier, which is gone, which was 40 feet. It was exactly 40 feet. it extended out. We've got 43.8 to the door here, so we've got greater than 50% of the dock still in place. So the dock was not destroyed. The appendage was destroyed. We've got a survey here, which dates, I don't know what the date on this is.
95.
95, which is a coffin who's long out of business. It was a survey of the area, and in here he calls it walkway and pier. And then I put in here also a blow up, which shows you that it is in fact, and has always been determined pier. So I think that's basically it.
Yeah, we just wanted you to have these additional measurements and photos that show that the actual cribbing that's adjacent to the house, which is again, which is not part of the house structure, doesn't support the house, it only supports the walkway and pier. That's still in place. It wasn't destroyed by the storm, as same with cribbing that's farther out. So I think it's important to understand that in addition to the fact that we had planned to do this repair work in 2022 before the storm, or the walkway portion extension was destroyed, that the majority of that walkway, the majority of the pier is still in place. So we think that this is exactly what the harbor ordinance intended when it referred to regular maintenance. And the fact that the walkway extension was destroyed in December doesn't change that. Because the walkway, and Jeremy referred to this, but I just want to reiterate it, because the walkway, the work meets the definition of regular maintenance, it's not subject to the moratorium also, because the moratorium also has an extension, it has an exception for regular maintenance. I'm not going to address the legality. I did in my materials. There's a lot of stuff in my materials that I don't need to address tonight. The legality of the moratorium, that sort of thing. But we would just like the board, if we would request that the board would please agree with our position so that we can proceed with obtaining the written permit from the Code Enforcement and Planning Office that Jeremy referred to. I also won't spend time right now talking about the emergency repairs issue. I can, if you have questions about that, or if you decide that it's not regular maintenance, then I would like to talk about the emergency repairs issue. But I think that in our view, the easier and more obvious thing is to find that this is regular maintenance. So that's what we're requesting. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions, board?
I do. Thank you so much for this presentation and for, very clear presentation. I have a couple of questions. Are you intending to rebuild the pier in a way that it'll be more resilient to storms? Are you changing anything to the original design to reinforce the structure or make it more resilient? Or what you're proposing as a design and material and the use of material that you're designing will be sufficient to avoid? I mean, you certainly don't want to rebuild this thing every 5 years. So what are you trying to do to make sure that it's more resilient?
This is actually the second time we'll have rebuilt this pier. First time was, I think, 2 years after we bought the property. We lost a great deal of other infrastructure in that same storm. One of the major problems that we have faced is that intermediary granite cribbing. It actually dates back to late 1800s in that shape. I found postcards that are in the 1800s that have that. It's not been changed. We had somebody come in and put stainless steel pins in it, but that wasn't enough. So what Proc is going to do is restack it so that it's in more of a pyramid shape, like my neighbor down below us. So it looks more of a traditional shape, as opposed to what we have now is just gollywalkers. It's just a bunch of rocks piled on top of each other. That makes it very precarious. The other part that we were working against was the fact that we're fastened to the granite cribbing was old concrete and split. These are things that we couldn't see because it was all buried, but we can see it now. So Proc is going to do a better job of building this out of aluminum. We're going to reinforce the intermediary, and we're going to pour a new slab of concrete back further. So We have good faith.
And I believe we also want to raise it 1.5 feet because of the, you mentioned the water.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're
And also
actually a
because
foot and a half low right now.
right, and the recommendations from the harbor committee is that moving forward, new constructions need to be raised.
Oh, we'd love to raise it 3 or 4 feet.
I mean, the
Love
issue, of course, is, you know, we need to be, this needs to be regular maintenance, right?
Right.
This needs to be repairs. And so, you know, so we might need to wait to do that until the moratorium expires and we see what's in the future. So I'm not exactly sure how we deal with that situation. We'd like to raise it 1.5 feet if we can.
Right now, it's legal for us to, Will came over and surveyed it, Will Garvey came over and surveyed it before we even applied for the permit initially. He said you're 1.5 feet low right now. The town rule will allow you to be 1.5 feet taller. So that was our original plan, was to come up to 1.5 feet.
So 3 feet.
You know, doesn't sound like a lot, but
No.
it is. This pier will still allow us, if the law changes, to raise it.
Okay.
It's not that big a deal, you know, in the scope of the whole thing, it's not that big a deal.
And I just have a question, I think for Audra, or Jeremy. So you're gonna be pouring a new slab of concrete. Is there an environmental impact of pouring concrete in the harbor that we have to study and approve, or?
We're gonna be pouring concrete on terra firma.
On terra firma, okay,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
There won't be any discharge into the
Okay.
water.
They won't use the ocean as a washout basin.
Other
Okay.
questions? Other questions, board? Yes,
Yeah, so I just have a picture here that. So. You know, this is the way it looks right now, and having been here for a while and watched what happens during storms, you know, this wasn't the first time that this, as you said, it wasn't the first time the pier had sustained damage. Little bits and pieces have been breaking off of it for quite some time. And it's a really difficult spot, as you know, that's why the yacht club's having so much trouble. And really the entire reason for the moratorium was because we realized that as a town, we have a lot of infrastructure like this and a lot that is getting built or has been built that is, you know, always had trouble with the weather, but is having, you know, more and more trouble. So the point is to not, I mean, this was a situation where people, many volunteers had to clean it up off of the yacht club. I've been seeing pieces of it drifting out to Lake Beach. There are nails in it. It's not just, you know, a problem for the homeowner. It's like a problem for the community when structures that aren't well suited for their environment break apart. So and my question here would be, number one, why haven't you cleaned it up yet?
The plan is when Brock brings my new one in to take this one away.
Yeah, but it's all supposed to be done at the same time. He was gonna come and take this one away, and so.
We weren't aware this was gonna delay like this.
And let me just say, we had planned to do this and had planned to do it all at once. This is a situation we don't want to have happen again, which is why we want to be able to do regular maintenance, which is why the ordinance allows it. We think what you're getting at is precisely the reason we should be allowed to do this, because it prevents this type of situation going forward in the future. Frankly, if unfortunately we were 1 year too late this time, but we're going to do a repair that means this won't be happening again for hopefully ever.
I mean, so the problem with our ordinance currently, and the reason that we're uncomfortable with new piers being built, is because there isn't a process in place right now to make sure that piers like this don't get into the type of condition where they're falling apart, and then we have to address it after the fact. So from my perspective, and from a lot of people's perspective that has been watching this pier deteriorate, and just listening to the description tonight, it was, you know, it had completely disintegrated, it had fallen apart. It was the reason that it failed, or part of the reason that it failed during the storm, was because of the deferred maintenance.
So first off, we talk about new pier. This is not new, right? This is an existing pier. It's been there for many years.
Right.
And so when you talk about concern about new piers, I get that. That's the point of the moratorium, and the point of what's going on with the planning board. But this is an existing pier, and as we showed, 50% of it is still there. or more than 50%. So I hear you, that the storm was an unusually severe storm. We didn't expect this to happen. Frankly, that the extent of that storm was a surprise to everybody. I think there's a lot of damage in town that people didn't expect. It had been over the years, over the course of 40 or so years, it had been rusting. It had been in tough shape, which is exactly why in 2022, Mr. Kastner contracted with Proc Marine to replace it this year. Unfortunately, we did it
To replace it, but to repair, if
to
it's
replace the
repaired.
walkway portion, not to replace the entire pier, to replace, and that's in, just to be clear, the definition of the ordinance talks about replacing. It says you can replace decking and refurbishing portions of the decking, and that's what we're doing. That walkway extension.
Sure, but that
is
means you're gonna be recreating it in the same problematic way, which is the concern. I agree with you that,
But
sure,
that's what the
it
ordinance
should be,
provides for.
it is highly debatable whether the whole 50% thing, I understand you're, you know, the best lawyer in the state probably, so you're, this is quite a, you're very good, you have quite a reputation. Maybe most expensive, maybe, so, I mean, it's just
It
quite
has
a,
got nothing to do with lawyering skills.
Let's stay on topic, please.
It was Peter who did this measurements. Peter did all this work that he provided to you. I didn't give that presentation.
That's,
But I
Yeah.
think we have,
so we're just, it's recreating something that is going to be subject to the same problems. And I mean, to me, it's disrespectful to the community that this has been left in this case. If it does get built any higher, this already blocks the view from one of the most important town properties that we own, which is the yacht club. Anything higher is going to completely block the view of Curtis Island. So it's just an inappropriate place for a pier, in my opinion, and I see this as a total replacement and not repair.
any
So
other comments? Stephanie, do you want to say anything? No, I don't hear. I'm sorry.
no, I mean, I think we're in a kind of, the proposal they're making is within the legal context they have to deal with. And we don't have a new pier ordinance. We don't have this yet. So the only option for them, if I understand correctly, is to act within the repair and maintenance, emergency repair and maintenance as it is currently stated. I mean, how long would it take you if we approve this request to be relieved from this moratorium? How long would it take you to clean up the skeleton?
Once we get an okay, we have the skeleton out of there probably in a week.
So it's almost like we're being held hostage a little bit.
No, we're not. No.
Clean up the mess until you
I'm
can.
trying to work
One
with you.
person at a time, one person at a time, please.
So I was not asking this question to make it conditional. What I want to hear is a commitment to clean it up. I was not putting the town in a hostage situation.
No,
saying-
not you. That's not what I'm saying.
Yes, but
I'm saying it about them, but.
But it was not my purpose. My purpose is to try to see how fast we can move so that we can
Okay,
clean
I
up
agree
the
with that.
site. But I have no further question. I have all the information I need. I'm ready to make a motion
Go ahead.
unless there are other questions.
No, go ahead.
So
Discuss it.
I make a motion that we approve the request for, is it the request for relief bill? How am
I
I?
find that it's regular maintenance and repair.
So sorry, there's three people talking at the time. I get completely confused. So I make a motion that we approve the request to be relieved.
She's
The
asking.
casting, how do I phrase the motion?
So what you're gonna do, you are viewing this, and I think you all have it right, as a matter of de novo review. You're not giving any deference to the code officer, so it is your own finding that you wanna make. And you would particularly wanna find, if I understand where your motion is going, to find that what they're proposing is either regular maintenance or emergency repair. So that would be one motion. And then if that motion passes, then you would approve the code office to continue their normal issuance of the shoreline zoning permit, the building permit.
Yeah, so let's do one motion at a time.
Right.
I get confused. So I make a motion that we find that the proposed work fits within the boundaries of the ordinance with emergency repairs and maintenance
And regular maintenance.
and regular maintenance.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? 3-1, motion carried. Second motion.
So I make a motion that we allow the code enforcement officer to continue with the permitting process so that the work can be started as soon as possible.
A second.
That work?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
So what are going to be the boundaries of how, in order to meet the definition of maintenance and emergency repair, what design criteria would be involved in order to have that approved, that building permit approved in such a way that it continues to constitute a repair of an existing structure rather than a new structure?
The short version is there's a requirement of submission, and they submitted all of that.
Yeah, we need to verify that that is all compliant, but they submitted all that.
So will it be identical to the existing, like at what point does it?
I'm not sure anything required to be identical. I think the point of the 43 feet of the pier, you know, that goes back to the land that is adjacent to the house. I think that's a valid point. So I don't think there's anything that requires them to play it exactly the way
Right.
it is. We're gonna make sure that it complies with the current ordinance requirements, both in the harbor ordinance and the shoreline zoning ordinance. In terms of height, length of, I mean, I
Do
would
we
assume,
sell-
I would assume Mr. Kessler's gonna install in such a way that the cribbing can be added to as time goes on, because that's what the intent of the harbor committee's recommendations were, right? So I assume that that's what they'll do. I understand that everyone's installing piers that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what will the height, so the height will be higher than it currently is?
I haven't,
We'll have more of a
gone into
visual
that detail,
instruction.
but I'm going to try to make sure that we'll have to find what that height was originally. You know, he's also working with his existing structure, right, on both ends. So I can't imagine it's gonna be much higher than, or at all higher than what's currently there.
I mean, it would be so much better if it wasn't made of a bunch of pieces that can break apart as they
Understood.
have, but I don't know if you can allow that to be a repair. I mean, I don't want this to happen, but if it is going to happen, I would prefer it happen in a way that's better for everybody in terms of visual impact from the yacht
I
club.
totally understand that. I agree with you, and I think Glenn and myself in review will make sure works within the ordinance requirements and with what was there.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other discussion, board? All those in favor? Okay, 3 opposed. 3-1, it passes. Good luck with your repairs.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The last item, no, that's not true. The next item on the action list is the action regarding the water level ordinance and policy. How do you want to introduce it?
So I'll so this is building on the discussion that came up at the last select board meeting when I gave the board an update on the water level petition and the work that the DEP was going to be doing. And the first step in that process was filing for intervenor status. So we had a discussion at the past meeting about how DEP said they prefer that local communities set their own sort of water level policy through an ordinance. And the board had a discussion about, you know, what that would entail and whether or not you all wanted to consider doing that. So this is really just kind of building on that and giving you the opportunity to discuss that a little bit more.
And you've got a letter in the packet in terms of recommendations now, correct?
Well, I just sort of, you know, summarized it and you know, I think that the difficulty with kind of setting an ordinance where there's, you know, really firm, you know, you identify water levels.
Sure.
It's difficult because it's something that you need some level of flexibility around. So I think that should you choose to pursue the ordinance route, you might want to focus more on, you know, process, who has authority, and you know, referencing a policy that can be changed, and that can be flexible, because you know, once you go through the ordinance process to change anything around, you know, levels or whatever it is, that becomes more difficult because you have to go back to town meeting. So I think if you're going to do it, focusing more on what structure, what's the, you know, who's the group that's responsible for doing it? How are they going to do it? That sort of thing. And then referencing a policy that can be changed by whoever is given that responsibility by ordinance might be the route that you would consider if that's the route you want to go down.
Okay, comments, board? But just to me, I did miss the last meeting, but I'm aware, and have been aware of the DEP situation and what's going on there, and I've dealt with this before in other jurisdictions, not in Maine, but never have I seen it go into an ordinance. Why? Because an ordinance is effectively a law that has penalties for non-conformance. If in this situation, which feels to me to be a needed operational procedure / policy, whatever you want to call it, that lays out the elements you talk about, is normal, the smart thing to do with any part of our operations in town. But if you have an ordinance that says, I don't know, lake levels and dam levels of a certain range, and some severe weather event occurs unexpectedly, what's the town gonna do? Send a notice of violation to itself? I don't see that happening. If the violation has fees, the town's gonna pay its own fees from the tax collector's money. That makes no practical sense. I think that there's a need for what you're talking about, but not through the ordinance.
Yeah, Bill wants to say something.
Mr. Kelly.
Listen to him first.
Just one thing, so I say this now, so not later, because you might have thoughts about it. One of the reasons that the ordinance has value is because the way the statutes are written, it's only an ordinance, not a policy. That can take precedence over the state coming in and deciding what the water number should be. So, for example, Swanville is a town that I represent.
Swan Lake.
They
Swan.
purchased the dam, and at the same time, for clarity, created an ordinance and also had that get passed by adjoining towns that abutted the lake. And it was essentially a self-determination type act, so that they could be in charge of their own water levels now that they were in charge of their own dam. So I understand your point, but it's just that the word ordinance has some specific meaning in the statute.
Got it.
So,
thank you.
So if we were to have a policy that would not fulfill the requirement from the DEP, and the DEP process would still move forward, correct?
The ordinance gives, it's one unusual statute in a way, but it allows for the municipality ordinance to take precedence over the DEP process.
Okay, but not a policy. Or if we updated the operational guidelines that Audra put in a packet with that flexibility range, the DEP process will still move forward.
The word the statute uses is ordinance.
Ordinance. Okay. Okay.
Also,
So, you know, one of the areas where the policy is really vague and weak is around the Montgomery Dam impoundment. It was really, the policy that we've been working off of was crafted with like a huge amount of work from people that have experienced the bad and the good and the highs and the lows really of the lake, and trying to plan for that. But it doesn't really get into an established water level for the Montgomery Dam impoundment, which is really was the impetus for the petition, because understandably, sometimes it's empty and sometimes it's full and sometimes it's halfway, and everybody's kind of left like, well, why is it like this, or why is it like that, and you have to call and ask. So I think if we're going to do an ordinance, in some ways you have to treat these different bodies of water differently. I remember when Seabright had the repairs that needed to be made, there was discussion, we could have saved a lot of money by opening up the gate on Seabright and letting, I remember John French was like, well, you could always drain the river. And I remember being like, what is he talking about? That's crazy. But it is what they had done, you know, for a long period of time. It was treated as a dam, it was a hydropower dam, and they would drain it. So, but we've decided, really as a community, that that is not like a hydropower impoundment anymore. It's a pond that needs to be maintained at a certain level. The Montgomery dam impoundment is different because it's essentially by request that it gets drained right now. And we don't have like a good process for determining how that happens. It has to get drained. People want it full in order to look nice, but it has to get drained if MDOT needs to do work on the bridge when they just remove a bunch of logs. It had to get drained when there are multiple building owners that need it to be drained in order to do work. So if we're just gonna, normally what the DP will do is they'll set a level that basically a range that has to be kept at. In this case, we haven't yet worked out a situation with building owners there that it would work to just keep a range of levels, because that would be denying them access to the pilings and stuff. They're not set up to be able to send a diver down to support the pilings. So it's a really like different situation than just the overall problem of needing to update the policy. I think we have to decide sort of which problem we're trying to solve right now. And I don't think, this came about because of the Montgomery Dam impoundment petition.
Yep.
That's why the DEP is involved right now, because it was requested by people that have property there.
But I think the last storm where we had 6 inches of rain falling over 3 hours in Lincolnville and 3 inches here, and that impacted the lake levels, also compounded that discussion around having a water level policy. So I don't see this just as the Montgomery Dam, but it's the lake, and it's really the managing our portion of the watershed. But what are we trying to solve?
That's my question.
Yeah.
Right, like discussing the lake policy, lake level policy isn't gonna solve the Montgomery Dam DEP.
Oh,
So the DEP petition was put forward, and we have the option to move forward with the process of setting an ordinance. And I think that is something that should be decided by the select board. Is it something that we want to look at and put on paper? I have seen other ordinances, and I wish that I had brought them because I can't even think now, but there are ordinances that are pretty lenient and give a little bit of leeway for certain circumstances that human intervention would need to come into. I don't think that it's something that we should just push off to the side and say, no, we don't want to, because it's hard. I think that is what we are here for. One thing that I've also been reading in the DEP petition is the impoundment. And people are just saying that it is the, are you calling it the mill pond that's right behind it? Well, from what I understand and things that I've been reading, the impoundment actually extends from the dam all the way up through under the bridge. And I'm not sure how far up, but
Almost the big old cafe.
correct. So that is the impoundment. So if they're using the word mill pond, and if that was their intention, they didn't say mill pond, they said the impoundment. So the DEP would be setting the water level for that entire range. And
because you can't control the level of that specified mill pond area without impacting the level.
Correct.
All the way to approximately the Washington
Right.
Street Bridge Bagel Cafe area.
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really feel like this is the launching point of a larger discussion. If the DEP moves forward with what they want to do or what they've been tasked to do, I don't know if they want to, but what they've been tasked to do, that's fine. But that shouldn't deter us from taking a look at this and bringing in, if we want to update the guidelines or the policy, create a ordinance that has a little bit bigger teeth. I think this is the launching pad to do that. And I feel like we need to get the right people on the table to do that, because I don't think that the five of us have
I have no idea how to
that
set.
sort of, but we do have people that have been involved over many decades that are still here, and other people that have been involved. We have the Watershed Association. We have people in Lincolnville, Aaron Bailey, who monitored the gates on an hourly basis growing up since, I mean, he has great stories about that. So there are people here that have the historical knowledge that could offer, you know, and I don't know, I mean, I haven't heard from Dave, but I would think that he would want to have help on what to do, because one person taking the blame for everything is really a difficult situation, and I certainly don't want to keep him in that.
Bill, just general question. You mentioned DEP and the ordinance benefit is this buffer between them coming into our backyard because we have an ordinance in place. And in most states, there's more than one agency that gets involved in this kind of area. Like, what are the other agencies in Maine?
Well, the agency in Maine that is emergency management certainly has oversight of the flow of water in storms and dam review and dam, they inspect dams. They obviously don't want to have a compounded problem when there is an emergency such as a hurricane and massive rainfall, and then have a dam fail. I couldn't tell you in great detail how they do interact with DEP because I just don't have enough experience. But they certainly have an interest, as anybody would expect, when there's physical infrastructure and property downstream.
No.
We only do the high hazard dams, and Montgomery Dam doesn't fall even under their characterization of a dam, but.
When you're talking about water levels, and that includes emergency, high hazard dams. So it's hard to me to understand why the DEP is the thing we're trying to buffer ourselves from, without the only agency out there that can come in and say, I don't like what you're doing. You know, so I'm to somebody's couple of comments, I'm not sure what the objective is here. And the only objective I've heard that I could agree with is it was the ordinance would help us to buffer ourselves from DEP. I'm all okay
You don't
with
think
that.
that anything that I said have
No,
merit?
I think what I said was, I don't think an ordinance is applicable because you can't enforce it. There's no enforcement. I'm having trouble understanding what guidelines you're gonna put on the lake, the river, et cetera, or a range of levels, let's put it that way. And then if something happens, which forbid, a hurricane is a good example, or some, a Cat 5 storm that hits us, it's gonna be exceeded. What good does that ordinance do?
So I think there are two issues here. The first issue is whether we want to go along with the DP process and benefit from their expertise and try to understand how to best manage the impoundment and the water levels. And the second issue is whether, if we don't want to work with the DEP, if we don't want them to interfere basically in this issue, if I understand correctly, is to set our own ordinance so that it would supersede, it would actually stop the process from DEP. And it needs to be an ordinance, not a policy or an operational guidelines, because the DEP requires an ordinance. So whether the ordinance is, whether we enforce an ordinance against ourselves, it's kind of a moot point, because the reason why we would want an ordinance is to stop the DEP process. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, one, do we want to have a document, forget about policy, ordinance, or guidelines, that gives us flexibility in managing the water levels so that we can better manage the water level of the impoundment? And number two, do we want to work with the DP or do we not want to work with the DP? And in that case, the answer is we need an ordinance.
And I don't think you can ignore the word receipt management either. There's another entity that has a play in this game. So just because you're buffered from DEP doesn't mean you're buffered from emergency management.
That's not what I'm saying.
I didn't hear you mention emergency. We talked about DEP as a, if we can do this ordinance, fine, give us a buffer for them. I'm not sure I fear DEP, to tell you the truth, but.
I don't think it's a problem of fearing having DEP. I just think it's a really great launching point to say that this is a problem. It's a clear problem. I don't think that anybody has an easy answer, and it's gonna be a hard process. I think this is a great launching point to say, we need to take this on and we need to figure it out.
Different, all I'm saying.
Regardless of the
All I'm
DEP
saying is that
petition.
There's a number of different ways of doing that, that's all I'm saying. Go ahead.
So I agree definitely with you, Stephanie, in terms of like all the experience of people and talking about it, and we should. Maybe this is the catalyst that we needed to bring more people into different parts of this discussion. It is literally the exact reason that we've been awarded $1.6 million from the National Coastal Resilience Fund, NOAA, and NIF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. They assess projects all across the country. They have this fund for communities that are vulnerable to coastal storms, severe rain events, and they will fund solutions that help increase a community's resilience to extreme storms and to also have wildlife benefits. So the issue of more water coming faster and how we should allow that to move through the system is why we have all of this money to do tons of designs. And so I think that we should look at it through that lens, take advantage of some of the expertise we've already brought on, and then say, I mean, I'd ideally like to see some kind of a subcommittee or group with the McGonatrack River Citizens Advisory Committee. I think in the past, some of the problem has been that we've got, one group that looks at this, one group that looks at this, one group that looks at this, and we do need that Citizens Advisory Committee to understand the flooding issues better and how that, or the low levels better. And, what should be the minimum flow from the lake? How should we measure that? How should, that be fluctuated? Do we need to upgrade the gate? If we're smart about it and we work together, there are a lot of needed repairs on some of these dams that we're going to keep forever, like the Seabright Dam and both the East and the West Lake dams, that we could come up with recommendations from a committee that with, Aaron Bailey and the Watershed Association and people like that, that could be fit into the larger project. Ideally, we could come up with a water level for Montgomery Dam that could just stay there all the time, and we would never need to drain that pool. And we can help the building owners have the support under their building that are, like granite cribbing or whatever would need to be, so that they don't have to access it.
Right.
And then we would never have to look at the horror of that, whatever that is underneath now. So, I mean, I think that you're right, Stephanie, this is like the launching point to say, hey, some of you people that haven't been involved before, let's collect all that expertise. I was reading an article from Ron Hawkenstad the other day about like the lessons learned from 1983 when they tried to do something, and there is a lot of knowledge there. I don't know. I don't think we need to do an ordinance to try to escape the DEP. I think that we're not going to come up with, we go through the process that's been initiated. They're going to either still, most likely going to say, we don't. They do this majorly for like big hydropower projects where there's a big lake and a lot of people impacted, and you get the hydropower company drawing down the lake, like to maximize profit and not caring about the impact of the lake.
That's true.
So it's a little different here. I think we'll benefit from some of what they say. They'll probably say they can help us in one area and you guys have to solve your own problem somewhere else. And that we move forward with reevaluating, tasking a group, a subcommittee of the River Advisory Committee or the Watershed Association or whatever, with looking at parts of that existing policy that need updating.
But I mean, so we have the group of the what was it called with Lincolnville? We met once about setting up the water levels, the dams. Was it the dams committee?
Dam advisory.
The dam advisory committee would be a great a great group to revive and work on, because it concerns the whole watershed. I mean, I'm not, number one, I would love to have the advice of DP. I think we would learn something. Number two, I think it would be very interesting to maybe have, at least maybe update the operational guidelines for this summer, because we're gonna have more, events, and we're gonna have more citizens and people coming around say, oh, you didn't drain the lake fast enough, and or you drained too fast, whatever. So maybe have a range. My issue is that I'm completely unqualified to tell you if it's about a water level range.
Yeah.
So what I would like is if we're gonna go this route, to update the guidelines, and then, as Stephanie suggests, really tackle this issue and have a policy or an ordinance moving forward. But at least can we have somebody help us set up those levels for the summer?
It's like a pretty good job that Ken Bailey, I can send you tons of articles that he wrote. There's never going to be another Ken Bailey. Like, he was not only, he was a police officer, he was the Parks and Rec director, he was the editor of the newspaper, he had a column all about wildlife, and he was a registered Maine guide. This guy could not only do stuff, but he wrote many things saying that he was basically apologizing for this mix-up or that mix-up. It was not possible to do this. What he did was he really wrote a lot and shared a lot about the decision-making behind things.
Right.
And what he said was the policy that's in place is fairly good. It doesn't really address the Montgomery Dam much, but we could ask somebody like the Watershed Association maybe to review if they see problems with it. But
I would really like to see so I know that when Ken Bailey was in charge of it, he had other people that were his advisors and that he consulted with them all the time. It wasn't just him controlling it.
it was
He
the
had,
Watershed Association too.
exactly, they had that whole group. And what I'm hearing now, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the dam control agent is the one person that controls it all the way up and down. And that person is in control of so many other things. How can we expect him to go out either on a daily or hourly on a big storm when he's also in charge of the public works, which is our operations of our roads? And what if there's a flood in the building? He's in charge of the buildings. He's in charge of so much that he needs help. The policy we have, the guidelines we have are crap.
Agreed.
I have other words for it, but I'll leave it at
Well,
that.
then you're saying what Ken
It
Bailey
is.
came up with is total crap, so.
Well, right now it is, because it's outdated. The information in it isn't even correct. And there are things in it that don't even pertain to it right now. So absolutely, right now, the policy that Ken Bailey put into place is outdated and crap, and it needs to be fixed. It should not be just a problem for the dam control agent. He should have help with the watershed. We should get the dam
The dam committee.
We had the last week, or a couple weeks ago, should have representation from Hope and Lincolnville. We put the river committee on in a completely different mindset. I don't think that, yes, they should be consulted, but I don't think that should be a launching point. I think this should be a complete separate thing on its own. Control agent would want to have help to create something that he's not the only one that's gonna be.
It sounds like we're all agreeing that something's needed, that's agreed, just a question of what is that action item? And is that action item, or is it development of a much more comprehensive policy or operating procedure, which could morph into, in other words.
Right.
Why don't we ask somebody like Paul Leeper or the Watershed Association to come and educate us a little bit about?
Do we have a member of the Watershed Association here?
No, I think.
I mean, it's not a matter.
I mean,
of
I
just
would like to
something
hear
that
what he has
control.
to say about if this is.
But we have, we have this river committee that needs to be involved. If we're gonna take advantage of our grant, and you just say, oh, they don't need to know anything about water levels, that's the essential problem we have.
Nobody's saying that.
Nobody's saying that.
please.
Hi, Tim Trumbauer, 6 Stony Hill Road, Rockport, and I am the executive director of the Montgomery Watershed Association. So,
Well,
thank you.
Comment.
what's your solution?
I'll go ahead. I prepared some remarks. Some of them are no longer relevant based on this discussion. So I'll try to follow along here. But I want to first say our mission, and our mission is to protect, preserve, and restore the natural resources of the watershed to ensure a healthy ecosystem for the benefit and enjoyment of all. So I want to make sure everyone knows that that's who we are and what we do. So we've had a lot of discussions with our board recently, and we've been reviewing the current operational guidelines. And I think they're from 2009, so I think to say they're outdated is fair because they're however 15, 14 years old. So the weather patterns are changing and things like that. So they likely, and there's also reference to employees that are no longer in the positions that are there. So I think that it's reasonable to think that they should be updated. I also just want to thank the town for providing information to us about the operation of the dam, to Dave and others, and for posting the logbooks and the transparency. I think is really important. And note that just in reference to the April 30th and May 1st flooding, that there were 2 to 3 inches predicted by the National Weather Service, and we actually received 5 to 6 inches depending on where you were in the watershed. So it's important just to kind of get those, at least the facts according to the National Weather Service out there and what happened. So in our discussion, what we kind of zeroed in on is, first of all, our willingness to be involved in the process as a watershed association, recognizing that we have, representation across the entire watershed. And we feel like certainly it's been our mission and we should be a stakeholder in this. We kind of looked at those operational guidelines and the dam advisory committee and recognized that it does not appear to be active. So that's an existing entity that it seems like would be a good place to start. And how that interacts with other elements and things like that is not really for us to say. I mean, that's for you guys to decide. But certainly we as a watershed association are willing to participate in that process. I just want to remind folks, like I mentioned, that we got 5 to 6 inches of rain and high and low water events will occur no matter what happens with the dam. There's no magic wand that's going to control water levels exactly. And everyone needs to understand that and people need to prepare for that. And in regards to the dam advisory committee, or however you feel would be most appropriate to implement that, again, we're willing to participate and help facilitate that. But we do have some recommendations, and that we just want to make sure that whatever entity is formed follows good governance principles so that it's transparent. We wanted to make sure that it seeks and responds to public input, and it takes a watershed-wide approach. That it includes, like you guys were just talking about, a diverse set of stakeholders, such as officials from the towns and the watershed, property owners from various areas of the watershed, commercial interests, and subject matter experts in water quality, fisheries, dam hydrology, and I'll add, based on the comments here, emergency management. And that, I think that convening that group, however you see fit, could help inform some of the other efforts that are occurring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll ask you a question.
Would you be able to, I don't know, if some of the members of the Watershed Association have been following the grant process and the River Advisory Committee, because what you're describing sounds a little bit more like what they're doing than in the past. The Dam Advisory Committee is a pretty small group. And some of the concerns that I heard in the past were that there was a lot of struggle getting attendance. There was, it was seen as like a lake level committee, like the war between the lake and the Seabright section of the river. So it wasn't like this really super robust group like you're describing. And I'm not sure just the amount of bandwidth that the town has and residents in terms of participating in multiple things. It seems like finding a way to figure out where there's overlap and where there isn't, and maybe Sophie and Forrest from the could figure out what, where there's overlap.
So if I may, so we've been in touch with the Watershed Association actually, and Tim has met with Forest. And we're potentially going to work together on maintaining the data loggers and collecting data and monitoring the, so we've already are in discussion with them. I think the issue, so in the way we thought about the role of the river committee, it's really an educational role and documentation role. We've been toying with Forest with the idea of having a technical advisory committee, and that might be something under which the water levels could be hosted with different stakeholders. The idea was always to involve as many stakeholders as possible along the watershed. So I think that's something that everybody's all in agreement with. I think for me, the issue is not reinventing the wheel and leveraging what we already have as assets. And the river committee has a time-bound existence, right? It's linked to the grant. The dams advisory committee, potentially could work forever, right? Has no time-bound limit. It's supposed to be a committee with representative from Hope Union, whatever, Lincolnville, so we can all manage the watershed together. So we have to think about this, that there's this kind of tactical grant situation that's going to last for 2 years, and we're going to come to some resolutions on managing the dams and the river, but there's the long-term also management of the watershed. So we may need to think those two different time span differently. That being said, I think, thinking about the Dams Advisory Committee, the Watershed Association, the role of the Citizens Advisory Committee, they should be probably kept appraised, but I don't think it's something they're going to undertake. It's not within, we don't have the technical expertise, and we don't have the bandwidth. Those members are already, committed to the guild, and I love them for this. So I think we need to have maybe a workshop. I hate saying the word, but I think at this stage, we really can't come up with a real plan right now.
I agree.
But maybe, and having a stepped approach, that updating the guidelines so the public can have a better understanding and expectations of what the water levels of the dams are, could be the first step. And then thinking about whether we want a policy on an ordinance and who we want to manage those things.
Right.
But I think we need more than what the time we have. And also, I would love to hear from people who have done it and learn from them and not reinvent the wheel.
The question is, I think it's all well, well, the only question is, if you're going to a workshop, the existing materials bad, right? The
existing what?
materials we have,
Yeah, the guidelines are.
It's bad. I just have to use a different word for it, bad. But it is, and I agree. But is there a possibility of making some improvements to that as a subject of a workshop? That's
Certainly, but I don't think that if you try to do that in a workshop,
it's
particularly the workshops, the way that we've run them, you're gonna get the input that you need. I think that any next step would be figuring out what is the structure that you're trying to create. And I also think that creating the structure, you need input from people like Tim, because it's not just the town of Camden. You shouldn't just be owning it alone.
No.
It needs to be, we need buy-in from other stakeholders that are part of the
Yeah,
watershed.
absolutely.
I mean, I would really like to have Tim, kind of, if, I won't talk to you, I'll talk to my people. I would really like the watershed to help us get a dam advisory committee back together. And have the watershed association offer up people that they would think has the expertise at such a level as we have in the area to get together and have the watershed, those people and Dave kind of do a hash out session and then come back and
recommendations.
some sort of recommendations. I think that would be a really excellent starting point, in my opinion. I mean, I think that the people in the Watershed Association, they are, as he said, stakeholders from all around. the whole watershed, I think that they probably have a better view of who we have out there that has,
Yeah.
you know, because I know people, you know, different people, Allison knows I feel like the Watershed Association probably gets really good input from people that
Yep.
But we should
would be
also,
best.
All right, we need to.
one last thing, but we should also share the minutes from the Dams Advisory Committee meeting we had like
Yeah.
a year and a half ago. Did we have minutes? I
It
don't
wasn't the
think-
Dams
It wasn't
Advisory
the
Committee,
Dam
it was a joint meeting with the Lincolnville Select Board to talk about steps moving forward. And one of the things that we all agreed on was that that particular committee was kind of broken in the form
Right,
that it was, because it really also needs to be brought in past just the dams.
So it kind of feels like we've proven that getting rid of it isn't really working very well.
No.
So all of, everything's being put on the dam control agent and probably Audra. And I would really like to bring other stakeholders
Yep.
into it.
Yep.
So that the community feels like they have other people representing them. They can have us, but like we just said, we don't have the expertise, and I don't have the bandwidth to do all of everything else that we have on our plate.
Yep.
And our current policy notes the dam advisory committee, or whatever it is called in here. And I would really like for us to kind of give that sort of ask over to the watershed if we feel that's appropriate.
I would like to see them temporarily take on the role of the Dam Advisory Committee and
So-
come up with recommendations rather than just giving us like a list of names and then saying, figure it out. It seems like you guys would be in a great position to provide some, not consulting, but, you know, advice or, you know, work in that role.
Yeah, so I think we discussed that possibility, and I think that the feeling is that we would be a good representative, but not a great, because we don't represent within our board necessarily all of the different expertises.
Right.
But we certainly can add a lot to it, and we can help recruit or talk to different folks that do have those expertises and bring them to the table, and we're willing to help facilitate that process. And I will say, without mentioning names, I do have soft commitment from someone who is involved in the organization, has been involved with the dam operation for years and years and years, and has that kind of intimate historical knowledge, and also a hydrologic engineer that has, you know, agreed to help us with this process moving forward. So I do think that we can bring in a lot of expertise and different viewpoints throughout the watershed to try to come up with a really holistic approach.
and link up with the work we do also.
Yeah, because all of these dams, there's so much really, really expensive work that needs to happen, and if we just do it in the same old way, we're gonna miss major opportunities. So some of the improvements that need to be made can be made in a couple different ways, some of which would be fundable and some of them wouldn't. I mean, it's why we got the grant.
So we're all in agreement, so do we need a motion on anything,
No.
or we're in agreement?
No.
Tim, do we need, or Audra, do we need to send a formal
So-
letter to the watershed?
Well, because you
or-
can't delegate anything to Tim.
Right,
he's not your
exactly.
employee. You can, but you can tell me to
Do it.
So please.
sort of
okay.
do this, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to Tim and we'll work together, and my goal is, you know, we don't have the bandwidth to take on another
No.
project,
Right.
but Tim's here saying that they're willing to facilitate, they're willing to get the group together, and we certainly can participate in what they sort of set up.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna get together, we'll figure that out. Come back, Tim will give you sort of the overview of what,
For the next step.
right, exactly, for the next step.
I think it's
And,
great.
and another thing that we talked about as well, today was that, you know, we're going to need to set up, you know, like a little group to keep the NIFWIF project
Yeah.
going, because there's a lot of coordination
Yeah,
that
the
needs to
technical-
happen between FB Environmental, Interfluve, and other elements of the project going on. And I'm not saying like Tim's gonna have the time to be involved in this, like, ongoing for the next 2 years, but I think as we're coordinating, as we're setting up, having him involved in that little steering group is gonna be really important, because he's gonna see all the opportunities that Allison's talking about to link this work that's going on in the here and the now and the more immediate term to that broader project. So I think it's all just about, you know, sort of enriching our relationship with the, you know, Watershed Association.
Absolutely.
And, you know, they're a really good partner, and I think that they can be an even stronger partner going forward, not just for Camden, but all the other municipalities that are part of the
So you
watershed.
have that charge.
Yes.
So we're all in agreement.
And I find it highly appropriate that we do that.
Great.
Thank you very, very,
Tim,
very much.
welcome aboard, because
Thank you.
I understand you were just recruited.
3 weeks yesterday.
Congratulations.
Great, thank you so much. We look forward to working with
Move
you.
on to our next item, which is the library bylaws.
Are you planning to ask for comments from the public?
Yeah.
Why don't you say something? Go ahead, Tony.
Well, no, I know Ray moved over there, so I didn't expect what was, I'm hoping to be asking. And
Use somebody's coin, please.
Reintegration.
No, but turn it on.
Yeah, reintegration Cove Road. I wasn't sure how this discussion was going to go, okay? I was very happy with the result of a new DM committee. I think that's very appropriate. I think
There's no do them committee,
That's
just
not
to,
what's going on.
that's not what's going on.
so, call it
A
DM.
possible.
It's the next version DM advisory committee.
Finish, right?
I think, you know, the DM advisory committee, but whatever you want to call it,
Concentration, yeah.
advisors on the DMs of the river, because we're always gonna have DMs on the river. Okay, and I think it's, people in Lincolnville, as well as in Camden, are wondering what this board was going to do. And I think this is the right move right now, and I would encourage you to make some publicity about what you're deciding tonight. So I think it's a great move.
Thank you. Tony, do you want to say something?
Yeah, Tony Grassi, 363 Belfast Road in Camden. Yeah, I had sort of one just comment on the ordinance question. If you read the documents carefully and the DEP regs, you can pass it, if the DEP acts, you can actually pass an ordinance later,
Yes,
which then obviates,
yes.
it supersedes, I guess is the right word.
It does.
Whatever the DEP said. So I don't see any reason to rush to write an ordinance. I think you let the process, you develop policies. Ultimately, if that means you want to write an ordinance because you didn't like what DEP said, you could do that. But it may be that there's no need. So it was a little confusing. And the other thing is, I think you're headed in the right direction. Exactly how you set it up, I think the charge of the Connecticut River Citizens Advisory Committee is a little broader than you all described it. Actually, their charge is to make a recommendation, ultimately, with concerning the whole watershed and the operation of all the dams in the watershed and so forth. So I think to sort of say, oops, well, this isn't really their charge, I don't think that's right. I think this falls foursquare right in the middle of what they're responsible for. And so I would be, however you set up the players that are gonna work on developing a policy, it seems to me, if you go around them and you have it done by a new dam committee, you might as well throw out. I wouldn't serve on that advisory committee if in fact you said to me, well, somebody else is going to be setting all the policies on water flows throughout the watershed. Well, then what am I here for? I didn't waste my time. So I would be really careful about how you deal with that, the authority of that committee.
Can I answer that? Can I answer this?
Answer what it was.
I'm gonna answer. Well,
Can I send you?
yeah, I mean, Tony, I'm sorry, but I don't think you understood what I said. I said that the river committee should not be charged with setting those levels and should not be in charge of this particular project. That being said, I think I was pretty clear that they should be kept in the loop and are part of the process. I never intended to shunt the Citizen Advisory Committee from this work on the water levels.
No, I didn't hear you saying that at
Okay.
all.
So we're in
You're
agreement.
on the committee and you're the liaison of the committee and
Yes.
you're the chairman of the committee. So I wouldn't have expected you to derail
the committee, I'm just saying, be super
I'm
careful
trying
here.
not to.
Yeah, I didn't hear you saying that at all, and that was,
Okay.
but all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Not seeing any hands, we will move on to the, again, the library bylaw amendments as is our packet. Any comments, questions on the red line bylaws changes?
I see that Kristen's here from the library board. For Kristen.
Anybody has any questions of anybody, including Kristen? I personally don't.
I mean,
I was at the Board of Trustees when they went over the change proposal. I actually requested that they send a red line version because that helps us understand what changes they're trying to make to the bylaws. But if Kristen is there and she wants to give us a.
No, she's right here.
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Kristen, I'm sorry. If you want to give us like a summary of the changes that are proposed.
Not the typos.
So I'm Kristen Smith and I'm just here on behalf of the Camden Board of Library. And we just have some updated bylaws. It's been 8 years since we've done it. So we just.
Tony and David, if we can continue. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, all good. Thank you.
So basically the updates are making things gender neutral, adding the ability to meet via Zoom or electronically, things like that, and just some clarification.
That's what I
So
read.
nothing major, but if you have a question.
No, and I remember, if I remember correctly, the Board of Trustees approved them unanimously and everybody was happy with the changes. I'm personally happy with the gender neutral language.
Thanks for coming, Kristen.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your service also.
Motion to accept or reject.
I make a motion that we accept the changes to the bylaws of the Library Board of Trustees.
second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion. All's in favor? 4-0.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kristen.
Kristen, take care. And that will bring us to our famous management reports.
Yes, and I do have some.
Oh, are we, before we do that, are we looking at the financials?
We can in a minute, yes.
Okay.
All right, do you want me to go?
Yeah.
All right, so about a month ago, I got a call from the past executive director of Penn Bay, Waldo County, Miles Hospital. I forget what their new name is, like Midcoast Health or something like that. Mark Foray. And he confirmed, some information that was going around about the hospitals having a new ambulance provider, North Star, who is based in Franklin County, and they have a relationship with Maine Health in Franklin County where the ambulance service is actually owned by the hospital system. And they also provide 911 service to, I think it's 5 municipalities in Franklin County. And the hospital really liked that model because they were assured that they would have an ambulance to do interfacility transfers. So when, the emergency room to rotate and open up beds if they need to send, patients to other hospitals across the state. It could be, Maine Medical Center, sometimes it's sent up to Fort Kent, all over depending on what the need is. In Franklin County, that model worked well with North Star, so they're trying it here in the Mid-Coast. And what that means for us is that they're no longer utilizing Northeast Mobile Health Services.
Yeah.
So the impact for Camden, Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville is that our system is really, there's a lot of affordability for the 4 towns because half of their revenue came from these interfacility transfers.
Right.
In addition to the contract that they had with the municipalities. Right. So it's a loss of revenue for Northeast and, it's just something for us to be aware of moving forward.
Sure.
And, I think that where we're at now, Northeast they told us they're still moving forward with our contract into FY24. So it's really just, us understanding what we want our ambulance service to look like and levels of service and having that conversation with our partner communities and figuring out what that needs to look like going into FY25.
Okay.
So that's just giving everybody the heads up.
Is the EMS committee gonna be involved, or?
They'll need to be involved in moving forward.
Yeah.
So that's, something that I just wanted to make everybody aware of, because I think over the next year, we're gonna have a lot of, conversations about how we do this going forward.
Yeah.
And this is the broader backdrop is that, there are a lot of small services across the entire state. The Mid-Coast is no different, that are struggling. And so, we've talked about regional models for a long time, but this might actually be the time where people are ready to seriously consider it.
Okay.
So I think it's just sort of keeping our minds open to what the possibilities are going forward. I've got a sidewalk completion or construction completion schedule for both the Washington Street sidewalk as well as the Route 1 sidewalk. So I'm gonna read through it all. I'll post this online as well, but I just got this today. So on the 15th, they mobilized and started doing the traffic control on Route 1, and they were saw cutting some of the concrete tip downs. Today, they were prepping tip downs on Route 1 and prepping the sidewalk for pavement on both sections of Route 1 that haven't been paved yet, but Route 105, that whole stretch. Tomorrow, they're gonna be prepping tip downs again on Route 1. Durago will be on site to install new concrete transition and curb pieces, so they're the ones who did the slip form curb. On Friday, more prepping the sidewalk for pavement, or both sidewalks for pavement, and Durago will be on site to finish the curbing. On the 22nd, which is Monday, they're going to be paving the Route 1 sidewalk areas, and on the Tuesday, the 23rd, they'll be paving the Route 105 sidewalk. On Wednesday, installing the ADA ramps on both segments, both Route 1 and 105. Thursday, the 25th, they'll be loaming and seeding and mulching the area. And then Friday, the 26th is the final walkthrough, cleanup, and they'll mobilize leaving the site. So that's where we're at. So
Thank you.
I think it's been posted on the Facebook. I think it's been posted on the Camden Town's Facebook, because I reposted it today. Yeah, it's
Okay. That's great. Other big news, the grant agreement for the NIFWIP Coastal Resiliency Grant. We received it, we signed it, it's been sent back to our project officer, so that's all
Official.
all official. We talked about this a little bit, but the Montgomery Dam had a broken board that caused a leak in the gate. So between Sunday night when Dave St. Laurent checked it, and then Monday morning when DOT arrived to also remove logs from the upstream side of the Route 1 bridge, the impoundment was almost completely drained. It would have needed to have come down a little bit for MDOT to do that work, but not like it did. So anyway, again, the board is broken, we need to fix that, and Dave has plans for how he's gonna do that, so it'll be a little bit more,
Resilient.
not a little bit more, it'll be much more robust than it is now,
I
so.
think it looks like it was all pulled back up, but they must have,
Maybe he did that already, and I'm just,
it's not good right now.
behind schedule as to
I don't know.
what happened. So anyway, and also we're doing work with FEMA. There's gonna be a meeting pretty soon about the December 23rd storm disaster declaration. And it also looks like there's going to be a disaster declaration for the May 1st storm.
Right.
However, we didn't really have any significant damage that needed to be reported to FEMA. There are a lot of other communities in Knox County that had major damage. They'll bring us up over I think it's $175,000 worth of damage in Knox County before we're tipped over the threshold, and then $2 million across the state.
I see.
And when everything's said and done, the state will hit that mark, but Camden, looking pretty good. We really didn't have anything to.
What about Pond Snowball area? Or I guess we've already tried to pull in those repairs to the last.
Yeah, I mean, we're still fighting them not fighting, but it's a
Discussing.
process.
But if we were gonna fight, we could add, and be like, well, if you didn't like the damage it did in the December 21st.
If that wasn't
storm,
enough for you.
we also could show you there's this May 1st storm.
Yeah.
Anything else, Andrew?
So those are my big ones.
All right, select board, Ms. Stephanie.
I don't have anything to report. My EMS committee was postponed until the next one. There wasn't a quorum.
Oh,
So wondering if that would have come up in that
Yes.
meeting. So I was like,
good.
why did we not know this? I feel like,
Thank you.
this is the way it is.
You're so good.
So a couple things, the Harbor Committee met last week. It was a really good, good meeting led by Elliot, because Josh was, he took one for the team, he had to be in the Bahamas.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, so a couple things came up. The first one was the enforcement. I've been talking to Audra about the enforcement of the unencapsulated foam. And we seem to have one float that's delinquent, and we're gonna find a way to remind them that the time to make the switch is over, and that we wanna know the plan and when it's gonna be executed. I feel it's much more productive to have them make a plan than find them. I really don't see the point of giving them a fine if we keep the foam. So that's one thing. The harbor, the boardwalk, super good work.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
Steve Pixley, and they did a great job. So if you have the chance to go and walk on the new site, it's really, really good. The harbor committee is a bit on the holding pattern with the pier moratorium. So I think one of the things we should consider is adding the pier moratorium to the workshop on June 28th with the planning board, so that we can know the next steps of whether to extend it and make sure that we have made sufficient progress. So that was from the harbor committee. I also sent a note to Jody that we need to hire a consultant to look at the safety pins at the steamboat landing before we rebuild. And I did that because I want to make sure we put money in the budget and that it doesn't come afterward like, oh, I forgot to put it in the budget. So it'll be in the works for next year. The River Advisory Committee, which we've talked a lot about today, there's a new newsletter that's going to come out. Their speaker series is really well attended. It was a good presentation today by Dr. Warren Rico, I want to say, and then Darren, I can't remember. Super interesting on the First Nations management of the land and rivers and things like that, and good potential work with them. We're going to publish the calendar of social events that the committee is putting together to communicate with the public and to invite the public to ask questions and participate in all those events now that the weather is nice. And I think that's it for me, because we did the library board trustees.
Yep, the Historic Resources Committee met. There was basically the entire topic of the meeting was to discuss possible recommendations for a historic preservation ordinance, which is something that is referenced lots in the comprehensive plan fairly strongly as something that Camden should do. There was a good conversation about trying to figure out the range of ordinances that would meet the state criteria for being listed as one of the towns that has a historic preservation ordinance. Once you have that ordinance, a few towns like Castine, Yarmouth, there are a bunch of them, but there are minimum requirements that the state has that would get us not only the town, but really a lot of the property owners in town eligible for a bunch of different funding. So it can be a really beneficial thing, but it's also a complicated thing because people inevitably, think of places where colors are regulated and stuff like that. So basically the consensus of that committee was really trying to find like the least intrusive option that would meet that criteria. So Jeremy was gonna follow up and reach out to the woman from the state so that she could give a few different like model ordinances that they could then review. So that was that. We also had a workshop for microsolid waste. And the major topic of that was the rising cost of leachate treatment.
Of what?
Leachate, and that
Oh,
gets
yeah.
treated at the Camden wastewater treatment plant. Significant revenue source for the town of Camden, also a significant source of water overflowing at, sewage overflowing at the yacht club and other places. So the cost of the landfill, as everybody knows, is borne by the four, Camden, Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville. The cost of treating leachate is something that will continue even after the landfill is closed. So currently, we're at about $200,000 to $250,000 a year as a corporation in leachate treatment costs. One of the things that they did years ago was fill in we have the water-filled quarry, which is what you can see when you're on Lime Rock and Union Street. And then the mountain where people are still putting construction debris, that was also a quarry that used to be about 300 feet, 200, nobody knows for sure, 200 to 300 feet deep. So it's water being pumped out of there. The recycling area historically was a connection between those two quarries. So when water got to a certain level in the north quarry, which is the water-filled part where you can see the water, it would go into the other quarry and significantly increase the amount of water that comes into contact with waste and then needs to be pumped. So the strategy has always been to find ways of reducing the total amount of water that needs to be treated. Years ago, they filled at a cost of about $700,000. They created a grout dam that would hydraulically separate those two quarries. That has worked. However, the level in the north quarry appears to have come up so high now that it's not traveling through the gut anymore. It's migrating through the ground, essentially, is the theory. So we've seen a big increase all of a sudden in the amount of water that's needing to be treated. We had somebody from a company called Leachate Solutions, Leachate Management Solutions, or something very similar to that, that presented on what they're doing to create sort of natural and on-site leachate management systems that could be specifically tailored to the leachate at the transfer station. And it looks like we might be a really good candidate based on the composition of our leachate. So anyway, that's online if anybody is interested, but it was looking like maybe $500,000 to $700,000 which is, if we're spending right now, our last bill from the solid waste, our last bill from the treatment plant was $300,000, and that's quarterly. So it's just a massive expense that's going to be borne by all four towns, and if we can find a way to do that better, it's actually worth like a really significant investment.
Yep.
So it would also maybe help with some of the overflows, and so anyway, that's very early stages, but the board just got to ask questions and.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then Arbor Day is on, the Camden Arbor Day celebration is on Friday at 1:30 at the corner of Free Street and Pearl Street.
Does somebody need to read the proclamation?
We already proclaimed, remember?
Right, wonderful.
But this is just the follow-up to the proclamation, which is one of the requirements of the Tree City program, of which we have been a part for 27 years, is that we hold a celebration. Also,
We didn't read the proclamation. We voted it. It was in the consent agreement.
Yeah.
It was consented. It was not read.
Consent agenda.
that's a
Consent
really-
agenda, yeah. We didn't read it.
Do you want me to read the press release of it?
No, let's-
That's a good point, though.
But did somebody read it during the thing at 1:30?
Yeah, we read it during the celebration.
Yeah, you did your official part.
Yeah, sure.
Are you saying that because somebody said, like, you didn't read that thing last time and you really need to? Is that why we're bringing it up?
No, I was just correcting.
No, I saw it in my emails and just wanted to make sure that.
You got emails about us not reading the proclamation?
No.
Oh,
Just that it needed to happen, so I just wanted to.
we voted on it.
No, not that you needed to, that, yeah, just.
You did your duty. Good.
All right.
With that, like, do you have a question on the financials?
I do. I actually do have I mean, it's not a question on the financials. It's a concern. So I read that, so there's two things actually, because I sent emails to Jody this afternoon. The first one, which I thought was interesting, is the incredible amount of pet licensing fees we're getting, which is double, it's double what we have in the budget. And I asked Jody, is that because we have suddenly like an influx of dogs? And she's explained to me that the state law now requires vets to tell towns when they vaccinate dogs that don't have their tags. And so the state is really cracking down on dog licenses. So if you have a dog, get a license.
Or there's
And
no thank you.
Exactly. I thought it was like, but my other question is on the snowball. And yeah, I know, sorry, Bob.
No, that's okay. I've been there, done that.
So I'm looking at the numbers of the snowballs, and they're not good. And we know we need to make investments. So I'm trying to figure out a way that I can convince the select board that we hire a consultant to tell us what to do about the snowball. Because the issue for me is that I've been on the budget committee and the select board, and I've already approved a groomer, right?
You've already approved a
We
what?
approved a groomer, like a $500,000 piece of equipment.
No,
And
we didn't.
No.
we didn't?
We contemplated it.
That's coming. That's coming.
It's coming.
Yep.
But we bought something else. Anyway, I would love to understand what is the plan for the snowball. Because I look at, a mountain resort like Stowe. Stowe makes more money in the summer than they make in the winter with skiing.
Mhm.
Because they know they're going. So I feel that every year we address like issues of maintenance failing or equipment that needs to be bought, but I don't see the overall plan for the snowball. So can we budget somewhere to hire consultants, people who know how to?
First of all, it's not an action item, so we can discuss it in another
I-
agenda. if you want.
Right, so I think it's something we need to address because,
Yeah.
and I know it's a request from the budget committee as well, that has been made more than once, that
No,
we
you're-
have a plan.
Not making light of the issue, it's live, Audrey knows it. But she's
And like
dealt
a
with it
system
for years,
for
it's a whopper, and it's this year, it's surprisingly low from my perspective. I thought we were gonna do better than that, but we didn't. That's really get, you can't keep pouring money, good money after bad, without a plan going forward.
Yeah, because the horizon is very short, I mean, it's like,
When does the snowball budget get acted on by the board? Next,
And usually we do it kind of like June.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, same thing with wastewater.
Yeah, it's.
or if there's a grant for resilience, mountain resilience, I have no idea.
No.
But we'd have a plan, because
Have we ever given Beth and Holly the leeway, the rope to create their own plan of what they would like to see a vision of the snowball be
There's your bonus.
before we jump
So
into?
we're kind of working with a informal group of stakeholders to kind of help figure out, okay, we have all the work that the foundation did,
Mhm.
about a bunch of work that the town did. We've got a lot of different plans and some of them are still relevant, some of them need to be updated. So we kind of tasked everybody with going through it and reviewing them and trying to figure out what's relevant, what isn't, what's
There are
Feasible.
There are
feasible.
boxes of plans.
Right.
I mean, maybe it would be an appropriate conversation during budget time to ask Beth and Holly if, maybe giving them a budget, if, I would assume that it would be a crazy amount of work for us just to say, hey, create a vision for the snowball and document it, like, what kind of budget would they need?
Yeah, I think
To be able to do
before we
that.
hire a consultant or go and, spend money externally, I think it's taking stock of what's already been done and figuring
Yeah.
out what's relevant, what isn't,
Let's
and
do it. Let's do
we've
it.
enlisted some helpers to do that.
we also have new
That's-
models on climate change also, so we have better data also.
Better data, and also and I didn't realize, we've had some amazing people move to this area.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable experience in
Amazing.
trail building and building mountain bike parks. and
Yes.
All these
yes.
sorts of things, so we've got some really good
It remains a
support
red
with
flag.
here.
Thank you.
That was.
With that, I'd like to.
Can I just ask one other
Oh,
question?
yes, of course.
So I have a few other questions, but we can
Mhm.
just talk with Jody about it just to get a clearer understanding, but do we have like a heating issue in this building? Because
Heating issue.
on the year that, you know, we've had pretty mild temperatures, we're almost 10,000 over budget from what we had. Do we have like,
A lot of
Do
it
we
is
have
just
a-
the oil costs are unbelievable.
It's a little burden.
okay,
Yeah.
that's all.
By the way, when are we doing the Siemens, when is the Siemens thing completed, so we can do the energy
And the roof is-
efficiency?
The roof is not
The
done.
roof is not
The
done,
roof
okay,
is not.
we'll know then. Okay,
Otherwise, it's completely.
That's why I asked.
With that, I'd like a motion to leave the select board and adjourn as an executive session under one MRS 4056E, legal rights and responsibilities duties.
so moved, as Stephanie would say.
Second.
I just,
Are you
Second.
seconding?
I am seconding it.
Okay.
Sure, I
Discussion.
am willing to.
All those in favor? 4-0.
Did you vote? Yes, you voted.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.